then that's also information, right? That you can sort of self-correct the course, because nothing is lost. We're still very early in the semester. So keep your, just keep your focus, but do reach out to me if you would like to chat about, how you might work differently in this class. I wanted to take a second to address a couple of questions. Someone has asked in the chat about turning in the reflections. Again, those reflections, you will have 5. They're about 1 to 2 pages a piece. You are going to keep them in a running document so that you submit one thing on October 10th. So that's coming up in a couple of weeks. Reflections 1 through 5, all due at once in one document. I need to see a heading or some way that I know what's what. I'm not hung up on format. You can figure that out yourself. But yes, you are turning them all in at once in one document. And there's a link posted to the top of the class page where you will do that. Okay. Another question that I'm sorry, Jules, did you have a question?
Yeah, sorry. So we have 5 reflections, but what is each reflection on?
So if you look at the course page, that link where you submit them, there are 2 documents embedded in that link. Okay. That's what you need to look at. One is the assignment guidelines. It's going to tell you, I'm opening it now, just so that you can lay eyes on it. The other document is a rubric. And so that's going to tell you, specifically what I'm grading on. But this Word document that's called reflection assignment, due at the midterm, these reflections 1 through 5. And they're coming from these topics: marriage prep and relationship programs. It's found on page 18 of your text. The second one should be written on love in the workplace, office romance. It's coming from pages 37 and 38 in your text. So that's the pattern, right? You read the excerpt on those pages. They're very short. You write a brief summary, and then I want the rest of your writing to focus on your own reaction, your ideas, thoughts, response to what you read.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions on that? I'm going to recommend that you start reading and writing now-ish. The intent is not for this to be something that you do on October 9th, that's annoying. Okay. Another question that I'm receiving emails about is attendance grades. So you can miss 2, right? 2 freebies. I don't need to know what's going on with you. We're all adults here. I do have to hold you guys accountable to being in the class. And the only way that I can do that is by posting your grades to the attendance link that I can create on As You Learn. So I just have to do it as is, right? If you're not here, you're not here. I record you as absent. If you're here, you're here, and you put your name in the chat. And again, I've gotten some, back and forth about that. That's the only record that I have of you being on the call. There are way more of you than what I can see on a Zoom, and I can't record, each box. So when I say type your name into the chat, if you fail to do that for whatever reason, I have no record of your attendance, unfortunately. So make sure you're typing your name into the chat when it's time. And when I record you as being absent, the As You Learn is going to adjust your attendance grade accordingly. So if you're missing a present score, it's going to look like that in the grade book right now. What I do at the end of the course is I go back through and I run an attendance report on everyone. If you haven't missed more than 2, then you get full credit for being in the class. So I have to manually make that adjustment at the end of our term. So it's up to you to keep up with your attendance, but don't panic if it looks like less than what you think it should because of those 2 freebies. They're just not reflected in the grade book yet, but they will be. Another component of your attendance is your participation in the asynchronous work. So it's a combination of both that you have to be keeping up with in order to get the full 50 points. Okay, you need to attend the class, and you also have to do those off-day assignments. And I keep up with those in a spreadsheet on my own, and then I go back in and manually give you your final attendance score. So you know what you've done and what you haven't done, and you know if you're here and if you're not here. So just manage that yourself. And then if there's a major discrepancy, at the end, we'll visit that together. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. I see your question, Theron, and I will touch on that at the end of class on those discussion questions that are coming up due next week. Any other questions before we get into today's content? Okay. So we are moving along. We're taking information today from chapter 5 in the text, which is a chapter about selecting partners. Mate selection is a component of that. And so we're going to kind of look at what are all the different factors that go into partner selection. There are quite a variety of things that we as humans sort of take into consideration as we are, searching for partners in this life. We'll talk about technology because, again, that's kind of a thread that runs throughout, right? And we're seeing lots of shifts and benefits, advantages, drawbacks, disadvantages to kind of the role of technology in partner selection. We'll talk about progress towards a committed relationship. So what does it look like when a couple, is sort of in that process of deciding to make the commitment to marriage? And then talk specifically about some factors that could affect one's decision to marry a partner. Okay. So the first key term when we think about partner selection is this idea of homogamy. Okay. Homo, a root that means the same. So homogamy is the idea that when we are selecting a partner, like selects like. We tend to choose people who are similar to us in a variety of ways. And this is not, not always, but generally speaking, people tend to choose partners from the same race, cultural background, similar in age, similar education status, intelligence, generally from the same social class, and then open-mindedness. This is kind of in reference to like our value systems, okay? It would be more unlikely for someone with very strong values, very strong political views, that don't align with another person's in terms of open-mindedness, tolerance for difference, those sorts of things. We tend to choose people who are like us in those ways. In a similar fashion, we tend to choose people who are, similar to us in terms of physical attractiveness. And physical attraction, when we think about sociological factors, this tends to be the number one factor in partner selection. It's the most important quality that people tend to use when deciding to pursue another person, right? In those initial steps towards relationship, because essentially, it's what we've got. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the online piece of dating and how that's kind of shifting because we don't necessarily see people IRL, right, in real life if we're meeting them in the online space. So that's, kind of a loophole. But generally speaking, when we meet another individual, physical attractiveness is the main thing that we notice, and that is that decision-making factor. Partners, again, select people who are kind of similar to them in stature. So most of the time, same height, weight-ish, same sort of body type. Again, this is not, there are certainly exceptions to this, but most of the time we follow that rule of homogamy, like attracts like. Same thing with religion, spirituality, and politics. I think it's really important here to make a distinction between religion and spirituality. They are not the same thing, although they have commonalities. So people with very strong religious affiliations to a certain sect or denomination, again, would choose people who had similar values and alignments, right? And then spirituality, that connection with something outside of oneself, a connection with the universe, or spirituality is a component of religion, right? But they're not the same thing. Our politics tend to play a role in terms of our partner selection. Again, we normally, just from like a functionality standpoint, we sort of need those things to align, right? It becomes very difficult to partner in life with someone who you're in constant opposition with about these really core kind of internal issues. So it just makes the partnership go more smoothly if we have these things aligned. Circadian preference. This is basically our sleep schedules, right? Some of us are night owls. In my home, it's interesting, and I guess it's a function of our work lives, but this has really shifted between my husband and I. So he goes to bed like very early by my standards. He also gets up at a time when I would never be able to function. And I stay up super late, and I get up, at like a normal time, 7 or 8 a.m. Compared to his like 4:30 a.m. stuff. I can't even, but our circadian preferences and our circadian rhythms have shifted, and it's something that we definitely have to navigate, because he often goes to bed around the same time as our children, and I'm left up alone, which is okay. I get a lot of work done. I have a lot of work to do in the late night hours, but it limits our time together, because he's gone when I get up. And so it's something that you have to understand about how it's going to affect your relationship and kind of work through how you're going to navigate that. So there are nights that I go to bed earlier than I would wish, and there are days when he stays up probably later than he likes. And that's, part of the deal, right? Traditional roles, we've talked about these kind of gender roles and the ideology around all of that, but again, it's going to be pretty challenging to be in relationship with someone who sees, for example, the woman's role as being in the home, if you have a strong desire and a passion to have a career and to, do something else with your time and your life. So again, our belief system about those roles and kind of how we want to see our life trajectory go is important, and plays a role in our partner selection. Geographic background. Typically people who partner, are from the same state, oftentimes from the same hometown. It's just sort of a function of logistics, and again, this is, I think, shifting, but there's a lot of research that supports the homogamy piece there. And then economics, sort of like educational background, socioeconomic status is going to play a role. And also, our value system around money, right? So if I'm a saver and I believe very strongly in kind of building for the future, it's going to be challenging to be married to a spender who wants to live in the moment. Yeah. So again, these things have to sort of align from a functionality standpoint, to make the partnership viable. So that's the laundry list, essentially, of sociological factors when we think about our partner selection choices. Any questions or thoughts, additional comments on any of these? By a show of virtual hands, can anyone say, I've had a successful relationship where this was not the case, not a homogamous? I mean, I have I am not married to those people though. So I guess when I think about my husband and our relationship, we are a lot alike in a lot of these ways. And then again, things have shifted. We've been married almost 10 years. And so I've seen some changes over time as well. And that's part of the deal. Got to be ready for that. All right. So moving now to think about psychological factors. Some of these ideas are going to probably be reminiscent of some of the frameworks that we talked about at the beginning of the class when we think about relationships and how we kind of understand relationships. This first one is sort of a new idea, but it's called the complementary needs theory. And it basically says that when we select a mate, we are looking for people who are opposite to us in important ways, but they are complementary. So I give you the example of, a nurturing partner. A nurturing partner needs someone who is receptive to that nurturing, right? If I'm nurturing you and you're closed off to that, it's not going to feel the same as if I'm nurturing to you and you're receptive to that. So they're kind of not in opposition, but they're opposite of one another. One is about giving essentially, and one is about receiving, but they complement each other well. I can think of, the example that I gave you about savers and spenders. That's an idea that's kind of in opposition to one another, right? But you could see how if you are completely miserly with your finances and life sucks because you never do anything pleasurable with your money, it could be beneficial to have someone in your life who's like, give a little, spend a little, like, let's live a little. And from the opposite perspective, if you're a spender who's just completely frivolous and you're never going to have anything, future focused or long-term, it's complementary, right? To have someone in your life who's like, we can spend a little, but let's also look towards the future. So that's another example of how we might seek someone who complements us in ways that we sort of need them to. Does that make sense? So the exchange theory is a framework that helps us understand mate selection in terms of choosing people who offer us the greatest rewards at the lowest costs. And this goes back to sociobiological framework, where it basically assumes that we're doing this kind of constant evaluation of like, what's this going to benefit me and how much is it going to cost? And when we choose a partner out of a group of partners or, along our dating journey, we choose one that's going to bring us the greatest rewards at the lowest cost. That's like economics 101, right? So, what are the behaviors, resources, the things that our partners are going to provide for us that keep us engaged in the relationship? Those are the rewards. The costs are obviously the unpleasant elements that show up in our relationship with other people. And so it's that balance of the two. We hope that we find a relationship where there's a profit and not a loss, right? And so we're kind of constantly, when we're dating, considering the alternatives. Is there another person out there who costs me essentially less and brings me a greater reward? And I know that seems like a pretty unromantic way to look at partner selection, but in a way, dims the facts. I think like we're doing it without even knowing we're doing it. Okay, some other kind of frameworks, theories. Role theory. This is the idea that a child growing up and looking for a partner is going to model after their own same-sex parent, right? So I essentially took on some of my mother's qualities and unknowingly sought a partner who was much like the one my mother chose. And I married someone similar to my dad. That's the general idea. And again, I think this happens at like such a subconscious and unconscious level that we do this without meaning to. Certainly didn't mean to do that. And we do it without realizing that we've done it until, you know, we're like, oh my God, I'm doing this thing that happened in my family of origin. And it happens. And so there's a theory that kind of explains our relationships in that context. It's called the role theory. Attachment theory, we've talked about this already. It's coming up again here in thinking about mate selection, but it's again that drive toward intimacy in terms of an emotional connection to another person. Attachment theory drives mate selection, right? It's pretty, not to say that all people, you know, have a desire to be married or to even have sexual relationships with other people, but most people deep down, I think, are seeking some sort of intimate emotional connection with another human. And so attachment theory is used to explain this. So someone asked a question, which is a really interesting question in the chat, going back to that role theory. I was raised by my dad. So does this mean that I might pick someone like my dad or my mom? I mean, I think you can probably look at that experience, and I don't know how much of a player your mom was in your life. I think, or if you had another, you know, same-sex figure in the house or in your, you know, in your inner circle. I think role theory is suggestive of that alignment with, like, as a female aligning with my mother. But that's a really interesting question. And I think it's probably really dependent on your individual circumstances and your relationship with your dad and, you know, what other female role models you had in your life. I think there's a lot of nuances to that. Someone else is chatting in. I was raised by my dad with no mother, and I picked a partner that was the exact opposite of my father, almost purposefully. And then how does this theory work with people who grew up with a mother who has had multiple partners? These are all really interesting questions. And I think I'm going to make a note to myself to do some digging on the nuances of role theory, because I don't always know the answer, but I'm interested to go and find it. So yeah, I'm gonna do some digging on that, and to be continued, right? I was trying to think of that, and I was about to say to be determined, but we'll come back to that. Thank you all for your thoughtful consideration of that theory. It's interesting for sure. So kind of looking at things from a different angle in terms of thinking about these psychological factors in mate selection, we're going to think now about undesirable personality characteristics, right? They seem pretty obvious, like we wouldn't want to partner with someone who's controlling or narcissistic, or who lacks impulse control, people who are perfectionistic, hypersensitive, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to read you this laundry list. It's outlined on page 98 and 99 of the textbook. And so you can read, you know, specifically kind of what each of these things look like. But I think what I will say is that, you know, these are things that on the surface, when we read about them, we're like, of course not. Why would I ever want that? But they can sort of sneak in, right? And we may be pretty far along in a relationship with someone before we realize, like, uh-oh, here are these undesirable characteristics. And so a piece of this is kind of noticing these early on and figuring out, you know, is this something I can work with? Or is this kind of a deal breaker for me? But the way that the textbook actually phrases this is that these are research suggests that potential partners who consistently display these characteristics should be avoided. So, everyone I think has inflated ego at times, or can be the opposite of that, right? Hypersensitive. But when a person is consistently behaving in that way is when you might be like, oh, maybe not. There's an exception to every rule though. Yes. And so, although we might see many of these characteristics as undesirable, there is a phenomena called the dark triad personality. And it's basically intercorrelated narcissism, deception or tendency to lie, and a lack of empathy. These are in the literature referred to as bad boys. And for whatever reason, sometimes we find females attracted to this personality type. And so it creates an interesting dynamic. I think a fair amount of this attraction is born and kind of rooted in codependency. And that's like a whole nother class in and of itself, and kind of like a lifelong work, working on ourselves. But it's this idea that I can fix someone, right? I can be in relationship with them and I can make them change. I can make them better. That never tends to go well. And so these relationships are often, largely unsuccessful for the reasons of narcissism, deception, and lack of empathy. But for some reason, there is something attractive about that to some people. Anything before we move on? All right, so cultural factors. We kind of mentioned this, with the idea of homogamy, right? But there's two separate terms listed in the text related to this idea of partner selection, sort of inside and outside of one's social group. Okay, so endogamy, inside of, it is selection of a partner who fits within one's own social group in terms of religion, race, social status, class, etc. The opposite of that is exogamy, which is marriage outside of one's social group. And often this is as a result of social pressure, right? So either family of origin or, someone in your sort of circle pressuring you to branch out and marry a partner who is not alike in these kind of fundamental ways. And then the idea of sociobiology, this is really sort of that evolutionary understanding of mate selection, right? It's the idea that at the end of the day, we really are selecting individuals that we think are most capable of helping us reproduce. We want to have offspring who, are going to survive, essentially. And so that idea of sociobiology, it looks at things like health markers, physical attractiveness, even so much as like the symmetry of a person's face. The symmetry of the features in your face is actually a marker of health and like reproductive viability. And so those are characteristics that, generally speaking, our population determines to be attractive. And again, this is all stuff that, we might recognize it on some sort of conscious level, but a lot of this, I think, happens unbeknownst to us. Women with wider hips that is suggestive of a better ability to birth and carry and birth children. And so, you know, it affects the female form in terms of the width of hip, but that tends to be attractive to male partners. Sociobiology, right? We're really just trying to reproduce and have viable offspring. Okay, kind of shifting gears now to look at the online opportunities related to partner selection. We're going to talk about advantages, disadvantages, and then talk specifically about some of these other ideas. So online, you know, dating, meeting people in the online space. Some clear advantages are that, you know, I don't want to say it takes a lot off the table, right? We don't have to experience the emotionality and kind of the physical chemistry and all that stuff that's happening when we're in person with another individual. So we can really kind of peel back and look at like core fundamental beliefs, values, things that, you know, we might not get into until much later in a relationship if we are physically together. I'm sure at this point you guys have seen the shows like give me one. Married at First Sight. What's the other? These are my guilty pleasure, y'all. I watch them like late at night. 90 Day Fiance. My favorite one, and I can't think of it. They put the people in the pot. Love is Blind. Thank you, Marin. Yes, y'all got it. All right, so they put people in the pods, right? And you can't see the person on the other side. And so they're like falling madly in love with people just by talking to them through a wall. And then, and that's the same idea here, right? Is that we're stripping away all that physical stuff that we get caught up in. And we're really just talking about what do we want our lives to look like? What do you believe? How does it align with what I believe? And I think there's probably a lot of like actual value in that. But you know, the drawbacks are also pretty clear, right? When the wall comes down, what if it's like, because again, physical attractiveness is one of those really key pieces for most people. So I think other advantages that are, you know, pretty clear is like, we live in a small rural mountain community. I don't know how long you're going to be here, but if you're here for any length of time, it's a pretty small circle, you know? And so if by the time you're my age, which is getting old, y'all, somehow, you know, it's harder and harder to find a partner. So I have friends who are in their late 30s. And, you know, it's like, how do you even, if you don't get in the online space and sort of widen that pool, right? So the advantage is that the dating pool becomes much larger when you have access to all of these people. Disadvantage though, and the drawback to that is that, you know, again, if I'm meeting someone across the country or across the world, there's a logistics component that's challenging. And you don't really know until you've come face to face with that person if they are who they say they are, right? The online space opens up a lot of opportunity for dishonesty. And that leads us into this idea of catfishing. Catfishing is the process of basically building a fake online identity to, you know, that does not represent who you really are, to sort of lure people into romantic relationship with you. Another sort of disadvantage or drawback is referred to, everybody knows what it's like to be ghosted, right? You're talking to someone in the online space and then they're AWOL. They disappear sort of abruptly and without explanation. You've been ghosted. And that can happen much more easily online than it can if you're having, you know, in-person contact with a person. I think other drawbacks are sort of the speed at which things tend to progress. If you're meeting people in person and kind of having a relationship that unfolds, organically. It's going to happen in a certain time frame based on when you can get together and when you can see one another. And there's a lot more kind of planning that goes into it versus if you're just shooting messages back and forth, DMs, whatever, that can feel like it's moving very quickly from an emotional standpoint. And so that could be looked at maybe as an advantage and or a disadvantage, I guess. But the point is, I think we're living in a world where this is sort of the way for many people. And so you just need to be clear on what you're getting yourself into, how you're going to navigate it, and certainly being aware of those, real specific downsides to online opportunities for mate selection. Speed dating, I think you've all probably seen examples of this. That's an opportunity, I guess, that's described in the textbook as a way to kind of quick and dirty is what I was about to say, but really quickly just like get the gist of a person, and then make decisions from there based on, is this someone that I even want to like continue to try to explore a relationship with? And that's kind of, I guess, how online dating works, right? You get enough information to know, is this even reasonable for me to consider, or should I just keep going? Okay, thinking now about that trajectory, and I apologize for the typo, commitment is a tricky word to spell. And I think I have too many T's in it. Okay, so basically, when we start thinking about long-term relationship, there is this usually, right? It would be kind of unusual, I think, for someone to just spring an engagement on another person without any sort of discussion about, is this the direction that our relationship is headed? So formally or in some kind of informal way, people are having the talk, right, before they go buy a ring and pop the question or whatever, usually. So that's what's the talk, it's like, is this the way that we're both kind of thinking? Obviously engagement in some form or fashion is typically the next step. A lot of people choose to engage in premarital counseling, and one of your written reflections is on this idea, like, what's the value in having a professional or an expert kind of talk you through some of the things that you will likely encounter. A lot of that is focused around finances, sex. I think sex is probably like one. Those are two of the big things that show up in marriages, right? Things that you have to navigate together. But for better or for worse, premarital counseling is an option that some partners choose to participate in. Typically, this decision to move towards commitment involves partners' parents, right? And we're going to talk about this later on in the class, but we're not just marrying. It's not just a commitment to an individual. It's really kind of a commitment to a family group. And, so we develop in-law relationships and all sorts of other relationships, usually out of our decision to partner with another person. And so it's important to kind of start to establish those before marriage, right? And then prenuptial agreements, I think you're probably all aware of what these are. Highly unusual for younger people, I would imagine, unless you're like an heiress to a fortune. They're typically, in place to protect financial assets, right? So if you are coming into a relationship with children from a previous marriage or a previous relationship, you might have a prenup in place to make sure that your children's inheritance wouldn't go to a new partner. And the same for business associates. Sometimes as business owners, it's important to put things into place legally before you merge your finances with another individual as a part of marriage. So again, something to be aware of, not something that I'll probably ever need, but okay. I need to stop talking for just a couple seconds. And so I'm opening up the space for you guys to think about what are some important things to do before you say I do. Like if you think about if I was going to marry a person in a year, what kind of things do we need to talk about? What kind of things do I need to consider? You can say out loud, or I see somebody's already typing into the chat. Discuss your debt. Yeah, for sure. Children. Have y'all been watching Love is Blind too? Parenting styles. Yeah, that's insightful. Religion. I agree with you, Ash. Retirement. Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of these ideas that are coming in are just sort of criminal records. Yeah. Run a background check. Ways of handling issues, communication styles, right? Like, do you shut down when you're faced with challenges, or do you want to like sit down and talk it out? I mean, these are all things that you, and hopefully you've been in relationship of some sort with someone long enough to kind of have a sense of that. Yeah. How do you fight? I mean, because we're going to fight, right? That's a given. I think morals, values, all of the stuff that you guys are talking about is like core stuff that you need to know for sure. The logistics piece, thank you for bringing that up. Like, where do you want to live? If I want to live in New York City and, you know, my partner wants to stay in Boone, North Carolina, how's that going to work? Any other? I think the last one that I see is a really good, how it's that idea of, oh, there's a word for it that's on the tip of my tongue, but like how much togetherness is enough for you and how much is too much. We have to have a balance of kind of what works for me. It's really about almost like introvert extrovert type of stuff, you know, and the same could be said with the wider social world. Like, do you want to be a homebody? Do you want to be going out every weekend? Because for some people that works, and for some people that's like very emotionally exhausting. And so, you know, you got to know what you're getting yourself into. Yeah, I would agree that, you know, a year doesn't even touch it personally. Being okay. Yes. I think, you know, fundamental, again, someone said being okay with our child being in the LGBTQ community, that's that idea of open-mindedness, right? And like, do our core values around tolerance and acceptance, do those align? Because if not, it's going to be difficult, I think, to navigate. I agree that love languages are very important, and figuring out, you know, what works for you versus, and in-law boundaries, another good one. Yes. How are these other people that we're kind of opening ourselves up to, how involved are they going to be in our lives, in our children's lives, if we plan to have children? So many things, right? So the textbook talks about some really important considerations to make or to have, you know, kind of holding in your headspace before you even think about getting married, right? The first one is like, don't do it when you're a teenager, because just to be honest, your brain isn't even fully developed until you're around 21 or 22. So you actually can't make, like, you don't have the brain capacity to make decisions about the rest of your life at such a young age. I question whether or not I'm even making those kinds of decisions into my own, you know, like I'm almost 40 and I still feel like, so teenage marriage, not usually a good idea. The book recommends dating for at least 3 years. I would say you're getting there at 3 years. Like you have a sense of how do people fight? How do they communicate? How do they interact with their families of origin? Like you cannot learn all that stuff early on in a relationship. And so I'd say by the 3-year mark, you're starting to find your way in that. Someone recommended living together before you get married. that I think is really closely tied to your beliefs and your values. And so I'm not going to advocate for or against it, but it's definitely an important consideration, right? Especially if you have like quirkiness or I'm a little bit obsessive compulsive in a lot of ways. And like for me, it was just really important to know, can I actually share my space with this other human? Because if not, there's no point, right? So just something to consider. But again, that's one of those pretty fundamental core things that some people are like, absolutely not, I can't do it. And some people are like, it's like, I have to do that in order to know. Abusive relationships. And there will be a time when we talk really in depth about abuse and its various forms. But just a note here that, if it doesn't feel right early on, there's probably, reason to sort of question. And abuse, it tends to be this thing that sort of creeps in, right? Starts with a little of this and a little of that. And it's usually emotional or verbal in nature before it's physical. But when, name calling, gaslighting, all of those real subtle emotional ways that people abuse one another, when those start to creep in, it's a big red flag. And you'll be doing yourself a service and really your partner a service if you just go ahead and cut your losses early on. And yeah, it's kind of a gut check thing, I think normally when people come out of those relationships, they can look back and clearly say, oh yeah, I should have seen that coming. But for whatever reason, a lot of times people don't. Compliments and criticism. Okay. It's really important to offer like words of affirmation and compliments to a partner, and then to avoid criticism. It's pretty damaging to another individual and to the relationship in general. Not to say that you avoid communication about issues as they need to be discussed, but it's the way that you come at it, right? I think a lot of times, you always do this or you never do that. Those very extreme kinds of language that we use sometimes can be really detrimental to our relationships. And then I try to make a practice with all of my people, my husband and my children, of really separating out behavior from the person, right? Just because my child or my husband is behaving in a certain way doesn't mean that they necessarily embody that. I try to really think that all people are good people, sometimes just having a hard time, right? But that comes across in how we interact. Similarity in terms of partnership, right? So the reason why there's so much research about this idea of homogamy and these sociological and cultural factors that draw us towards other people is because those tend to be the relationships that work, right? Is when we partner with people who are similar to ourselves. On again, off again relationships. These are tumultuous, right? They're usually characterized by some form of emotional manipulation, abuse. There's a reason why you're trying to get out and then you keep getting sucked back in. So it's a huge red flag, right? On again, off again relationships don't tend to be successful. So consider that when you're thinking about marriage and, long-term commitments. Other family members' opinions. You can take this for what it is. I mean, I think that really depends a lot on your relationship with your family of origin. Do you value their opinions? Do they align with your own sort of beliefs and values? Usually they do, right? Even if we don't think they do, I think a lot of times that stuff, again, is like, it's so deep in us that we might not see it until later on. But, again, like that idea of people are are wholeheartedly good. I try to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, and most parents want what is best for their children, even if they're coming at it from an overbearing or a weird angle. I think they're, it's usually from a place of good intent. So something to think about anyways, when you're making these choices. And then sex life. Your sex life before you get married is going to be a pretty solid predictor of how successful your relationship is going to be. So if it's something that you're already, dissatisfied with, red flag. The idea of settling. Okay, this is really exactly what it sounds like. Staying in a relationship because it's comfortable, like it's good enough. You feel like you might not find a better partner. That is not a reason to marry another individual, or to commit to another individual long term. So settling is usually not going to result in a successful relationship. Oftentimes we settle for mediocre love. It's I'm happy enough, we have enough sex. Like, you just don't want it to be like, it's good enough. You really want to be partnering in life with someone who excites you and you're passionate about, and you're also companionate with them, because some point down the road that excitement, that passion is going to kind of fizzle out. But I think initially you want kind of all of those things to be in place to a certain level. Sometimes we settle and kind of act in fear, right? We fear that too much time is going by. I'm getting too old. I need to settle down, whatever the fear is. Fear should not be a motivator. It's a really good motivator of behavior, but usually not for good reasons. And we typically make decisions that are not our best when we are working and operating out of the place of fear. Guilt is another one. Like, I certainly hope guilt is like the ultimate emotional manipulation, in my opinion. If someone's trying to make me feel guilty for not doing something or for doing something, they're just trying to control me, essentially. And so being made to feel guilty to partner with someone is not what you want. Anxiety, if you're anxious around partnering with another person, probably something to dig into, like, why is that? And so that's also, good indicator that we're not supposed to be in long-term relationship. And then feelings of depression related to your relationship. I'm not talking about mental health issues here, as much as just, if you're wanting out of a relationship and for whatever reason are not able to achieve that successfully, that can create both anxiety and depression. So don't settle, find the right person. And then last idea here is don't marry for the wrong reasons. This is a pretty good list of reasons why you should not marry another individual, right? If you're just coming out of another relationship, give it some time and space before you jump into a next one. I would say before you even jump into a relationship, but definitely don't marry the person until you've had enough, processing time. Trying to escape from anything, from your home of origin, from your family of origin, from a financial situation. None of those reasons are good reasons to marry another individual. Pregnancy is also not a reason to marry another person. And, like, there's a ton of support out there. You have a lot of options besides just getting married. So not a good reason. Psychological blackmail. This is the idea that, like, you can't leave me, I would never be okay. It sometimes goes so far as threats of suicide. Again, that is emotional, in my opinion, abuse. It's manipulation for sure. And it's just like super unhealthy, super unhealthy. So no amount of psychological blackmail should create a reason for another person to commit to long-term partnership with an individual. money, not a good reason. Insurance benefits, financial gains of any sort. Again, you know, like, it's just not a good reason to marry another person. Pity. I mean, that's just sad, right? Don't marry someone because you pity them. And again, like that whole idea of I can fix things, I can make things better. You can't fix anything by marrying another person. That's a terrible framework to go into it having. So, you know, you really want to come at it from the other angle, and like, things don't need to be fixed until we've been doing this long-term commitment thing for a long time, and then you work together in partnership, right? But if it's starting out from a place of like, I'm trying to rescue or help, or I feel sorry for this person, it's not good. In much the same way, if we are not whole already and we don't feel like, another person can never make us okay and make us whole, you know, we have to be coming into it already content and happy and fulfilled in order to really partner with another person and have the type of fulfilling relationship that we want to have. And there's a lot more about these ideas in the book. I'm just kind of highlighting them here right now. But lots of things to think about before, well, as you're even, you know, dating and looking for partners, lots of things to think about before you make a decision to kind of commit to the long term. And then certainly lots of things to think about before you actually make that commitment, and lots of reasons why you maybe shouldn't. So that is what I have for you today. Before I dig into what's coming up for next week, if you will type your names into the chat so I have record of you being here today. And then I am going to our As You Learn page just to briefly show you the asynchronous work that you'll be responsible for Monday. So there's a quick, actually it's a pretty lengthy video that I've posted for the first thing. I only want you to watch the first 5 minutes. You can certainly watch more if you're into it, but the first 5 minutes is gonna unpack kind of this idea of mate copying, which is a theory that there's a lot of research around, and it's very specifically related to mate selection, partner selection. Okay, so I want you to know what the mate copying, like what is it, so you can understand it. And I've got this article posted for you to read. Okay, it's not too long. I want you to watch the 5-minute video probably first, then read this article, and then you have 4 discussion questions. These are not being posted to a forum because I want to be able to well, I just need to have access to them in a different way, but these will come in that assignment link on the course page. It doesn't have to be anything too elaborate. I really just want to see that you digested this information. What is mate copying? What are some of the key ideas that I'm asking you about, and kind of what are your thoughts around it? Okay. So, I mean, a paragraph or 2 per question. I don't really have any specific parameters. If you can do it in less than that, go for it. If you need more than that, right on. Okay. Questions?
So can we just like put that in a Google Doc and then turn it in?
Yeah, you just need to be able to submit it to that link. And so I think a Google Doc will work.
Okay.
Maybe a Word doc. Okay, that's it. Have a great rest of your week. So that's due by next week on Sunday. You have the whole week. I just wanted to mention it because it's a bit different than what we've done thus far.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. I'll be
Thank
around
you.
for a few minutes if anyone needs to stick around and chat. Otherwise,
Thank you.
have a good day.
Do we have a discussion post this week?
No.